Welcome to Raglan and the Baboon's Workshop. Today we're going to be talking about battery safety and some of the simpler things you can do in basic design. So for the first time, I think ever, I have actual notes that I'm going to try and go through with headings, so this will be slightly less off the cuff than my usual videos, which might be good, it might be bad. All of the Chinese bots and renter mob who didn't like me being rude about the safety on the BYD E6 a couple of years ago, hopefully they'll come back for this one because I'm going to be rude about the Europeans. So stay with me for that. So, safety on batteries. What people often are concerned about, they hear about, they read about, are fires. And they immediately associate that with chemical, you know, the battery cells themselves going bad. Like, for example, over here, all these things that I find walking around after, especially in the summer, vapes. Batteries in there. It used to be a thing that vapes would go bad, or your cell phone batteries, you know, the bad Samsungs. Generally with those, it feels like somebody messed up somewhere. Like the Samsung smartphone batteries of a few years ago, I think it was Samsung, they had put a real sharp corner in the pouch, which meant that the different layers pinched together and short circuit. That's one form of the way that batteries can go bad. That is intrinsic to the battery. But then there is the whole design of the system, and that's something else. I mean, the corner in the Samsung battery I mentioned, that's actually a kind of an example of that, but it's still within the battery, within the cell. But within the whole battery, you can also design it safer and less safe. That is also safety for people assembling it, or repairing it, or maintaining it, or recycling, or scrapping, etc. So what am I talking about? Well, here, let me stop showing you my ugly and instead show you some examples. So I've been working on electric cars for a very long time, not quite as long as they've been around, because they've been around since the 19th century, but you know, a long time. And here's an example of very old school Nissan Leaf. So these are the conductors that go between different cells. So it's a funny old layout. Some of them, the actual conductor is missing, but you can see the conductors are inside this plastic case, and all of it had covers over it, which I can't even remove. So those clipped in nicely, and you have to be deliberate and careful about removing those clips. All of this is even after you've opened one of the metal boxes. So this is a Nissan Leaf battery on its side. So that lives under the car. You have to take that out from under the car. You then have to take all of these bolts out from around the sides. On the newer ones, you then even have to cut a glue like mastic, like what's holding a windscreen in. And even then, once you've got into it, all of the conductors have this plastic insulation all over them. You have to work very hard on a Nissan Leaf if you want to cause a short circuit or give yourself an electric shock, which is really good for the guys in the factory and girls when they're assembling it, because they are spend much less time at risk. And then for people servicing it, again, it's not often that you go into an electric car battery, but if you do, it's good to be as safe as possible. The latest Nissan Leafs follow this design philosophy. Tesla with their Model S. So here is a Model S module. That there is lethal, or it would be, except that it's got this very thin, very cheap, very light piece of plastic over it. But if that plastic wasn't there, and you dropped a metal tool on that, you would be in a world of pain. There would be a spark, there'd possibly be an explosion. You might find yourself the plasma in a weld pool. Wouldn't be good. The actual terminals are under here. Yep, and they've got little rubber plastic covers over them again. So again, to get to this, you've already done a huge amount of work, and you are deep in it, you're committed. You should only be there if you think you know what you're doing. But even then, it is still very hard to get yourself electrocuted. Now then, that brings us on to this thing. It's by an Italian company called Midac, which are big enough and fancy enough that their corporate headquarters has a fancy design to its building to have their logo incorporated into the shape of it. So they're not like me, just some dude in a shed. However, back in the day, I had an Italian sports car. I had a Fiat X19, which is like a poor man's Ferrari. And I was a penniless student at the time, and I paid like half a baked bean for it or something, and it was mostly rust. But its lights often wouldn't work, and I managed to get a hold of the manual. I'm not sure if it was the Haynes manual or if it was, anyhow. The electric section said something like, the original Fiat X19, its electrics were designed by monkeys. And the facelift, which is what I was driving, is worse. Those were more or less the exact words. They definitely ascribed it to primates. And I've had a couple of Italian cars and vans, and they always have bad electrics. So something that's purely electric, it doesn't bode well. So what we have here, this was actually a forklift battery, and it was living in a steel case. Bear that in mind, steel. So it's 16S lithium iron phosphate, so about 50 volts, and the sun is making it not very good to see. But we have essentially, it's two batteries side by side, more or less. Like that over there is basically the same as that over there. And so it's got two negatives in the middle, and then it runs through, down, back to us here, here, across, back, up, back to us, and here's the positive. So look, we've got positive, 400 amp fuse, positive 400 amp fuse. This thing, let me show you, to give you an idea of how much power it can deliver. You can get an idea of how big the connectors are. So here on my electric bike that can do a kilowatt, the connector is like that. This battery, oh dear, is heavy duty steel. That is the charging connector. The discharging connector. So this gives you an idea of how much power it can take out. Somewhere bigger than a shotgun is the power connector, and the charging cables are 95mm. I don't even know what those are. They can't be 150mm, can they? Anyhow, they're huge. This battery can create a huge short circuit current if you were unlucky enough to cause one. But like the cars, they've designed it intrinsically safe, so it's hard to do that. No, they haven't. So this is the negative terminal here. That is the positive. Sure, there's an 800 amp fuse between, but by the time an 800 amp fuse is blown, if you've dropped a spanner across there, it's gone very badly for you. Very, very badly. Then, let me show you. So all of this stuff here, it's on a steel tray, yeah? A thick steel tray. And this here, these are the conductors for the cells. Look at the clearance. There's no clearance. Here's my thumb for scale. So assembling or working on it, look at that connector there. It's very nearly touching. It's incredible. There's no safety in design here. There should be protectors over those. Then let me get to, so every set of cells, it ends essentially like this with a sort of a buzz bar that comes out and down, or every module I should say. And that there is down, and again it's coming close to the steel case. So I really don't know if you can see, but there's also, to make these, get these bolts on, there are weld nuts on the back. And they are very close to this metal. So I got this battery because it had gone wrong somehow, supposedly, and everything I checked out on it seemed moderately okay. I got it for pennies, basically. So then when I got it back to the workshop and I removed it from its case, I should probably show you its case actually, which is also steel. Basically its case is steel here, conductive everywhere. I got it out of its case, I started measuring things, and I realized that the chassis had a voltage on it. And so I'm like, that's not right. So I started looking and trying to find it, and reluctantly taking this thing apart. And I eventually got to the stage where I had to take this whole case off, this whole lid, sorry, off, to look in here, because the voltage indicated that the problem was somewhere around here. And I found that essentially in the middle of here, let me back up a little bit. Batteries always swell a little bit. You've got to clamp them, you've got to constrain them to stop them swelling, but still they'll swell a little bit. These ones, as they swell, this bit here, if I show you from above, it goes from being flat to bulging. And so that bulge comes out towards this here. And that's what the problem was, deep down in there. These bits here were actually touching that there. In the middle, so it's down here, the buzz bar goes along the top, so there is no need for the vertical bit, which is good, because I figured the best way to fix it was to saw the vertical bit off. So here's one of the sawn off vertical bits. So that is the same as that, but only from in here. Oh, and by the way, like, everything is exposed. I could disappear into a plasma ball right now. Anyhow, one of those was touching the case. And there it is. So it actually like touched, and there had been some kind of another connection at another point, and it's welded itself to the case. Now that's fine, because that doesn't immediately cause a problem. But then the next one that does that, you've got a big ass short circuit on a big high current delivering battery, and it's totally predictable. You know how these cells age, you know that they swell. You end up causing chassis faults. Yeah, you can actually see a bit of the bow there. I don't know if you can, if your angle there, yeah, see where the metal and then the yellow and the green, it's swelled out. So yeah, you get one short circuit or one contact to ground, that's fine, sort of, but then any other follow-on fault causes basically catastrophe. And this battery has no mitigation, no design for that. Like they should have designed these sides to be strong enough to not swell, but they should also have put insulators behind the buzz bars so that even if the swelling does happen, it won't cause a problem. And they could have not put these vertical buzz bars on the ones where they're not necessary. And they could have done so much more, like not having that shelf out of metal on top of all of those buzz bars, that you could get thousands of amps coming through there and just melt the whole lot, destroy the person who's working on it, or just cause a fire, which goes back to what I started with: safety in batteries, fire in batteries. The battery itself, the cell itself, could possibly cause a fire, but you should use good design practice. There's nothing fancy about designing a battery. It's just engineering principles. It's just the things we do as engineers, je suis engineer, to try to mitigate potential faults. It's our job, and that's a fail. So anyhow, yeah, this one I was saying, it welded itself to the case, and like, yeah, that's fine by itself. Obviously at some point, this one wasn't a problem when I was working on it, but obviously at some point it has had some really bad thing happen to it, because this pair, what the hell is, it looks like a student's welding bench. It is obviously short-circuited and had like a serious event before it's basically melted itself away. So you can see on these good ones, the threaded part stands up a lot. On these ones here, not so much. It's basically gone. Yeah, so I think I've made that safe, and I think I've made my point about safety and how we can design for safety, and we should do better. I don't know what the safety standards are that you have to follow to design a battery, but I'm amazed that this thing is legal. Anyway, let me see. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay. Here we go. I've nearly finished. BMS open standards for another video, and trying to pitch myself to try and get paid. All right, let's do both of those things. So, next thing, BMS. This thing here, this is what measures what's going on in this battery and tries to make it safe. It should, I don't know if it does, but it should, again, all EV ones do, have some kind of a ground fault detector. So essentially, it would know that short circuit that I fixed was there. That could be why this battery ended up as scrap and came to me as pennies. Maybe the BMS did know that ground fault was there and basically refused to make it operate. I haven't been able to make the battery switch on properly. I can make it switch on for charging, but not for discharging. So maybe that's why it's grumpy. Maybe that's why it got junked. Thing is, I don't know, because out here, this one's near the charging port, and this one goes on the discharge port. These BMSs communicate by CAN, which is just a sort of a computer language, but it's not a language, it's like a computer alphabet. And different manufacturers use a different language using that alphabet. I can get the CAN messages out of this, so I can read the symbols, but I don't have the Rosetta Stone. So without that Rosetta Stone, I'm guessing. To me, this is something that we need to sort out in society, is the ability for computer protocols and design standards, to be fair, to be free and accessible to all. Because this BMS could be telling me something very important about safety. Like maybe it was already saying about this fault, but because the protocol is, what's the right word, proprietary and protected from me, I have no way of delving into it. To me, that is wrong. The BMS is the critical safety thing that makes lithium batteries able to be used, rather than just being something dangerous like a ticking time bomb. And we should have open access to what they're saying. Like I say, it's a different video. I maybe will go into it and try and argue the case better at some point if I can be bothered. But just hold that in your mind. All right, so before I finish destroying this battery, like not literally because I'm using it now to charge my house, before I finish this video destroying the battery's design and safety, punching it scary, I should say, hopefully you've got the feeling from this video that I understand a lot about this, and I've worked on a lot of this stuff, and I'm still alive, and I've still got all my fingers. Yeah, this. I know my way around design. I know my way around batteries. If you are designing a battery and you don't want to design it as dangerously as that, please maybe consider me as a design review. as an expert. I have been a professional engineer for a lot of my career, so I know about paperwork, I know about the right way to do forms and reports, and I would really like the world to not have any more things like this in it. Let's do things properly, and if I can help with that, get in touch, and if I can't, please, you guys do all you can to make the world a better place. All right, I hope that was interesting, and see you next time.